Welcome to Crossing Cultures, the podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Crossing cultures, making changes, in new ranges, crossing cultures.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crossing Cultures. As you know, we're doing a couple of episodes on wellbeing and mental health, and we are blessed to have Selena Grant, the wellbeing consultant, back with us again. And this time we're going to discuss wellbeing and mental health for our young people, our children, your children, and how parents can support in the household. So Selena, how are you, my lovely?
I am well. I am blessed. It's wonderful to be back here with you, Keish. How are you doing? How are you?
Doing okay, doing much better. And I have to say that I have listened to our first recording quite a few times.
Okay.
Not because I want to hear myself, but because I really wanted to kind of hold on to a lot of the information. And it was really nice to see the feedback from a lot of people that received it really well.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about like it going out to thousands and thousands of people. It's about the ones that do listen to it. They have to be the right ones that it impacts.
Yeah.
And I definitely am more focused on impact than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's been really good to hear how many people really appreciated the things that you were saying, and they really did learn a lot. So thank you.
No, thank you. Praise God. All glory to God. And just to add on to that as well, a lot of good feedback came this way. And even from reposting your posts, I had people coming back to me that were actually struggling with, traumatic symptoms, PTSD, and hadn't quite reached out yet to somebody or a professional. So it was really, really good feedback.
Yeah.
I got keep going, Keish. Keep going.
Keep going.
Try.
It's your amazing input and your knowledge and your experience that makes the whole difference here. So
all glory to God.
Amen. Seriously, amen to that. Yeah. Definitely. All right, we're going to jump straight into it. Yeah. So like I said, our focus is going to be about encouraging parents in the household. Yeah. So right now, many parents are navigating their own emotions. How can they still show up as a sense of calm and safety for their own children?
Yeah, that's a big one, really, amongst all that's going on right now. But I think for me, just to keep it short and sharp and snappy, really, if I can, is attend to your own needs first. It's that situation, when you're on the airplane and you have that presentation that they do, and they say when the mask drops down, collect the mask, cover your own face first, and then attend to those around you. So I think it's about recognizing your own needs, your own concerns, attending to them, because you can't be a help to others, unless you've helped yourself first or sought help for yourself first. So attend to yourself first. Be transparent. It's a difficult time. It's a tough time. Address the feelings. Let's not try and hide things under the carpet. Address how we're feeling. Acknowledge it. Be transparent. Attend to your needs. Get help and support that you need, so that you can then help your children or others.
Okay. I like that, and I like the analogy as well. Yeah, I can visualize that. Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Okay, so how do you explain what's happening in the world to children without overwhelming and frightening them?
Yeah, again, another one that I can imagine for, parents, teachers, carers is going to be a thing they're trying to figure out and address. I think the first thing to do is acknowledge, what do they already know? The children around you, the children in your life, what do they know? Because sometimes children are hearing things, sometimes they're piecing bits together, they're putting two and two together and they're coming up with 500, or some of them might be putting two and two together and coming up with 4. Ask them, what do they know? What do they understand about what's going on? And then address the gaps according to that age. Let's have a conversation with these young people that is age appropriate. Don't be all doom and gloom, with the situation that's going on. Yes, there's news happening, but, just explain to them that, this is happening, but actually you're doing the best you can to keep them safe, and so are other people.
I like that. And I think that's probably something that we often don't really do much, is the same thing in teaching. And when we're assessing our students' knowledge, the first thing is, what do they already know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
it's a powerful tool to do that. Sorry to cut you, but it's a powerful tool to do that, because actually, like I said, children know a lot more than we can give them credit for. actually. They're quite intelligent beings. So have that convo, see exactly where they are, what they understand. Why is war happening? Why is this country war in that country? What's going on? What's the root cause of everything? Assess them, if you like, assess to find out what is their knowledge. And then, as I said, fill in the gaps according to that age and the information that they need to know or should know without being doom and gloom, and focus on safety.
Mm, thank you. So, what are some of the signs that parents can look out for that can identify that their
Yeah.
children are struggling emotionally, even if their children are quite, silent with it?
Yeah. Silence is one of those signs, Keish. A child that is silent, especially if you're a child, you know what your child's baseline is. You're my friend. I know you. I know your baseline. Therefore, I know if you're up or you're down. I should know. All right. It's the same with a child. If you have a child that's close to you, you should know what their normal is. So if they become very silent and they're normally quite talkative or interactive, that's a sign. If someone's become quite withdrawn, someone's become obviously quite tearful, distressed, someone's become more angry, more frustrated, more anxious, more scared, lacking concentration. These are all different signs that somebody might be quite emotionally distressed by what's going on. So the key thing to say here is there's so much I could say about this topic, but I think the key thing is know your child's baseline. If they are varying away from that baseline, that is probably indicative something's going on for them. There's some level of distress. It needs exploration.
Mm, okay. So, how can parents create a sense of normality and routine when everything around them seems and feels uncertain?
I think the key thing is what you've said, is keep routine. Keep routine as much as you can. Again, if you've got someone in preschool, primary, secondary education, what is their new normal? What time do they normally get up and have breakfast, get washed, get dressed? What time do you normally go out and leave or log on to go on to your school, your school, yeah, to do your work? What times do you normally go out to do activities if you're still doing activities? What is the normal? What is your normal routine? Try to keep that as much as possible while obviously maintaining safety again. When you start to change, children thrive, you understand, children thrive off of routine. That's why school's so structured. Break times, morning times, class times, this times, that everything's on a time schedule. Children thrive in a structured environment. Keep routine as normal as you possibly can, in short.
Mm. Okay, so what would you say to a parent who feels like they're not getting it right during this time?
Mm. You know what? I sympathize because a lot of people and parents will feel like that. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and we can try our best, and sometimes we just don't feel that we're doing as best as we can. There's always going to be room for improvement if you're a loving, caring parent that's striving to do the best for your child. So I think the first thing I would say is give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. If you are doing the best that you can with good intention, then your best is enough, in the sense of it's better than doing nothing. you know if you are a person of faith, then I would direct you to 2 Corinthians 12:9, which says God's power is perfected in your weakness. Okay, so if you don't feel good enough, able enough, not feeling like you're doing the best, know that in your weakness, God, if you believe in God Almighty, his power is literally made perfect in your moments of weakness. He can strengthen you, guide you, counsel you, give you what you need in that moment, to be able to help them go in and support your child.
Yeah, okay. I agree with you on that one. And also, so I'm going to throw in a different
Mm.
question. Our children and even us, we're living in a very different time where everything is so accessible, where
Yes.
in previous wars, we didn't have social media.
Yeah.
So there's a real sense of, you've got AI.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to fact check because a lot of the
Yeah.
times the information is not correct. And when you said that you should ask your children what they already know, I think that's a really important thing to do
Mhm.
because then you identify some of the wrong information that they have,
Yeah.
the incorrect information,
Yeah.
and you as a parent with the right information can then give your child the right education. And also as well take it as an opportunity to kind of introduce the history behind some of these countries and religions so they can understand the foundation of where some of these conflicts and issues are coming from. But I do feel that you've raised a really good point of identifying what they already know. So
Yeah.
my question is, how do we then protect our children who do have access to social media? And in times, they're seeing images that are quite emotionally challenging. And I think in terms of an adult as well, I even up to yesterday we had there's an Al Jazeera journalist that was unfortunately killed in his car, and there's lots of footage around his body, and I was just like, that's a lot. And if I'm
Mm.
finding it a lot, then I know that children who have access to social media are also finding it a lot. And I also think it's quite important for parents to be quite in tuned and up to date with what's going on,
Yeah.
because you probably got some parents that don't have social media, so they don't know what's going on. They don't see what their kids potentially could be seeing. So how do we protect our children around access of social media during this time?
I think, it's a really good question, Keish, really good points that you're raising. And I think as parents, we've got to do our parental role and responsibility and use due diligence. We should be putting in the things that we already know, or we should already know, those basic parental controls, the screen monitoring. We should be doing those things, especially for the younger ones. But even for the older ones, let's try and get into a habit of, putting phones aside, having, no social media time. And I know that can sometimes seem a bit easier said than done, especially for the teenagers who are glued to their phones. But I think then it's a responsibility, I have to say it's a responsibility then on the parents, on the carers, to get to know the world of social media, because I almost feel like, how can you fully safeguard your child if you don't know the kind of things that they're contending with? If you can't navigate on the social media sites yourself, if you can't begin to tell the difference between AI and all these other things, then how can you guide the child or the young person in the right way? You need to be informed, and I think you need to be speaking to them from a position of information and actual factual knowledge and some level of understanding. So yeah, I think it ties in again with asking them what do they know, even sitting down speaking to you about what they've seen. What have you seen on social media lately? There's lots going on. It's having that conversation. There's lots of images, there's lots of pictures, there's lots of news. What are you seeing? What do you understand about what you're seeing? How is that making you feel? Have those open, transparent conversations with your child, and
Yeah.
to tell them it's okay. You, as an example, as a parent, we have to model. We have to demonstrate modeling behavior. So if we are expecting our children to put phones aside, to not be scrolling all the time looking at stuff, we have to do the same thing. They have to see us doing it first as the responsible adults in their life for them to begin to follow suit.
Okay, I really do. Yeah, I appreciate that. And also as well, when I was looking and watching, listening and watching back to the first episode that we recorded,
Yeah.
you said something about secondary trauma.
Yes,
And that's exactly what social media is creating for a lot of us
exactly.
and for our young people. And that's why I do think it's important that parents are up to date with what's going on social media as well.
Yeah. What we was talking about before, so that secondary trauma or vicarious trauma, you know, again, I was talking about it in the context of when we use our senses, our five senses to receive information about significant events that's happened, we can then experience trauma. And that's what is happening literally to everybody that is viewing. Look, I'm one of these people, I do not, when you're on social media and you get those videos that say explicit content, sometimes I
Yeah,
come up, I will never, ever open anything like that, because actually I know once I've seen something, I can't unsee it. Right. So that's why we have to have that conversation, that social media conversation with our children. We have to talk to them about vicarious trauma. How many adults know about secondary trauma? Right. This is why we have to get to know, because you're almost allowing our children and allowing ourselves to be traumatized, and then not knowing how to deal with it, or what therapeutic modalities, or what protective factors we then need to put in place to safeguard ourselves on the back of that and deal with that exposure. So yeah, these are very real conversations that we need to have. We're being exposed daily and not even aware of it.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, I really think that's been really informative. Again, definitely did learn a lot from that conversation. Now we're going to move on to the different types of counseling, because I've always been curious to, okay, so there's counseling services out there. Which one do you go for? You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't realize there's so many different
Yeah.
types.
Yeah.
So, right, we're going to get straight into that one.
Okay.
So can you break down the
Yeah.
main counseling types,
Okay.
how you would identify it,
Mm.
and how they support needs differently?
Okay. So, good question. Good question that people need to know the answer for. Counseling is a word that is thrown out there, and counseling in itself, let's just break that down, is a talking therapy. It's a talking therapy where you have a trained professional who's going to help you navigate through your emotions, feelings, experiences that may have been causing you some kind of, mental discomfort. Or affecting your well-being. All right, that's counseling in its entirety. And then there are different ways that you can receive that counseling support depending on what's presented. All right. So what do I mean by that? We have CBT. There's quite a few, but I'm going to list, I'll probably, if I can have time, list probably just 5 key ones. All right. So CBT, which is what I'm trained in, is cognitive behavior therapy. So in short, in summary, it's where a therapist is working with you to think about how your thoughts are impacting your feelings and therefore impacting your actions or your behaviors. All right. It's understanding that link between thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors. It's really, really good for anxiety and depression. And what it actually does is it gives you tools or strategies. I like to use a toolkit, analogy of a toolkit. When you have CBT and you've got anxiety or depression, as an example, it gives you tools to go in your toolkit to manage those symptoms of anxiousness or lowness when they come. It's different to a talking therapy in the sense of venting, just in straightforward counseling where you sit and you might just vent. All right, this is actually managing specific symptoms and then getting specific tools to manage. All right. You've then got so psychodynamic, I'd say, is the second psychodynamic therapy, which really is a therapy to explore your childhood or your early relationships and how that might be playing out or manifesting or coming across in your subconscious in your current time. All right. So it's mainly good for dealing with relational issues, people that are having issues with, I don't know, parents, siblings, friends, husbands, wives. You might want to use psychodynamic kind of therapy is a second. I would probably say DBT, probably as a third. This DBT is dialectical behavior therapy, very similar to CBT. It's like an offspring to CBT. It's a therapy where it's used to, how would I describe this to you? It's used to deal with really intense emotions, self-harming behavior. And it really teaches 4 key things: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. This kind of therapy is really good for borderline personality disorders, as well as those that are self-harming. Really good for the self-harmers and personality disordered people, because in those diagnoses, you have very, very strong, overpowering emotions that need regulating. If I could say a third one, I'd probably say EMDR. People have probably heard of that. You've probably heard of EMDR, but not maybe know the detail of what it is. EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. All right. So what this basically means is you have a trained therapist who will guide you through a traumatic memory, a bit like with PTSD, past trauma. They'll guide you through a traumatic memory, and you will do something called bilateral stimulation, which is eye movements. So you're thinking about a traumatic situation, they're guiding you through some bilateral stimulation with your eye movements. And what that then does is it reprocesses the memory. All right. So that's really good for PTSD and past trauma. And then the fifth probably thing I would mention is play therapy for the younger ones. Again, where we have maybe less verbal children, they don't have the vocabulary, they can't quite process what's happened. You use play, toys, painting, colouring, drawing, to help them tell their tale and receive some recovery, I suppose, and restoration through the exploration of what they've dealt with or are going through. That are probably the 5 key therapies that people have heard of. in terms of how do you know what one to go for? So I've mentioned there are key therapies that are good for key presentations, but I think it's a bit like, okay, if you go to see a personal trainer, do you want just a plan and go away and work on it by yourself? That's maybe some CBT, some tools. Do you want some guidance as to actually how to do the exercises, and with a bit more depth and understanding to how to reposition yourself, what weights to carry? Maybe that's more of a psychodynamic, you know. So you've got to think about what level of support do you think you want at the moment, yeah, to determine what therapy is going to be best for you.
Okay. So if you've got a counselor in a school,
Yeah.
um, so when you're studying to be a counselor, do you need to do all of those? Do you need to be qualified? Because you said you're qualified in one area. So to pick the right counselor for a school, what would
Yeah.
their background or their qualifications need to be?
So you can specialize. People do. My pathway is quite different to, I suppose,
Mm.
core. As you know, I've come up in a different kind of way. Um, but I can still speak on this. So I've trained in cognitive behavior therapy. That's an area that I'm going to make it sense. So I've trained as a mental health nurse 26 years ago, done the masters in mental health, trained in CBT, I've done counselling, done some other things on the back of it. So people have different kind of routes. But if you go down, let's say, a core route, you've done your core counselling degree, you have that, then you might want to go and do specialize in different areas. You might want to specialize in EMDR, you might want to specialize in trauma therapy, you might want to specialize in CBT or EMDR. You can specialize. You always touch on these things in your core courses, but you can go and you can always do extra additional training in different areas. But the key thing is to do core. Once you can do core, you can do lots of other little courses, or you can go much deeper
Right.
individual areas, depending on what your interest is.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
interesting.
So for someone who's never been to counseling before, what would their
Yeah.
session look like?
First session, so it cut out a bit. First session.
Yeah, the first session of
Yeah.
counseling, what does that look like?
Okay, it's not scary, it's a chat, a bit like what we're having now. The counselor, the therapist will, tell you a bit about how they work, in the sense of how the sessions will work, the regularity of it. They'll discuss confidentiality, safeguarding, they'll touch on those things. But then they'll also invite you to speak and share, well, what has brought you to therapy? What's brought you to counselling? So it's your opportunity to share what's been going on. And what that then does from the counsellor's perspective, from the therapist's perspective, is build a bit of a picture, understand you a bit more. They haven't known you before. They can understand what you have experienced or are experiencing that has led you to the point that you are sitting opposite them or next to them in a particular session. And then it also gives you an opportunity to work out, am I clicking with this person? Or, you can ask whatever questions you have. So that's really a first session. I'll set the scene about therapy, and they will invite you to share what's gone on with you. And then you'll be able to, hopefully at the end of that, set some goals, set some expectations, to be able to work through over a number of weeks or months, depending on what you need.
Mm. Okay. I think that's quite interesting as well, where you're saying that as a client, you can also make a decision whether or not that person feels right for you,
Mm.
which kind of makes me feel like, our young people, when they're getting counseling in school, they don't have a choice.
Wow.
I know that the services, like, you can't pick and choose who you speak to, but I've never really thought about that. We give them the counselor, but they don't have a choice to say whether or not if they actually click with this person or feel comfortable or safe to open up.
Yeah, there are, Keish, there are a number of reasons why therapy doesn't work. When you go to counseling therapy. One is the wrong modality. I've just given you five. All right. So one, you might have the wrong modality. Two, the person might not be experienced or qualified sufficiently to deliver the work that they're doing. Or three, that you might just not gel. Sometimes people's spirits do just not take to one another. And actually, when therapy doesn't work, it's usually one of those things: wrong modality. The person is maybe not very good, not very experienced, not qualified efficiently, or you just don't gel. go and look at research out there. You'll be guided to normally one of those areas. Or of course, you might just not be ready, but then if you've gone to it in the first place, it's because you've probably sought it and you think you actually want it. So that's probably on the latter end of why it's not working.
So how do you know when it's the right time to seek counselling? Not just for children, but for adults as well.
Yeah. I think from the minute you start to say to yourself, there's a number of different reasons why I think people would know when to seek counselling. But I think if you are at a point where you're thinking, okay, either not sleeping very well, feeling a bit jumpy, or feeling a bit overly stressed, or I'm getting quite snappy, and you start to think to yourself, is this normal? Is this normal? Is this how I normally am? Or when you start questioning yourself, you know, that is normally a time when actually you might think, there might be something going on that needs a little bit more exploration. So in the context of the war, what's happening, when you are overly jumpy, we spoke about hypervigilance before in the last time we spoke about sleep. When you're not sleeping, you've got insomnia, you just cannot sleep, or you're just staying in bed all the time. When you'll become so completely withdrawn, not just because and isolated, not because you've been told, okay, it's stay in your house, it's not safe to go out. Now it's safe to go out, but you're still just staying as a recluse. These are all key signs. You're not eating, your appetite's completely gone, or you overeat. you know Again, this baseline is really key. When the baseline begins to shift, and it shifts and it stays shifted for a period of time, that might be a time. Or you just genuinely feel like, yourself, I don't feel like I'm coping right now, I feel like I'm overwhelmed, I feel overly stressed, I feel overly anxious, I feel really afraid, I feel really scared, I just need some help and support. When these things are coming up in your mind and you're questioning yourself, or you're having that internal dialogue, it's probably time to seek some help and support.
Okay. Oh, okay. So some people feel hesitant or unsure about therapy, counseling. What would you say to someone who's on the fence with it?
Why are you on the fence? What's your reservations? What's stopping you? What's making you feel uncertain? That for me is always where I would start to go. But at the end of the day, I think um I felt myself slowly falling into therapy mode in that particular.
I felt like I was there. Was like, you asking me the questions rhetorical? Sorry.
Sorry, I just felt myself just shift right into that. But that's where I would naturally go with it. You see, that's the thing.
A moment of, the film Get Out. It's like stirring the car.
So funny. So I would normally go there with it, right? But I think I would say, what's stopping you? What's hindering you? What do you have to lose? Because remember, you can go and have that first session and be like, this is not for me. That's okay. No one's holding you hostage. Go and make that first step. Just have a conversation and just see. If it's not for you, it's fine. You tried it, might be the wrong person, might be the wrong time, but at least you've gone forth and explored. Try it.
Mhm.
You have nothing to lose.
So when somebody does actually start counseling, what does progress actually look like?
Progress will be different for different people depending on what, remember the different modalities that I've mentioned, the different kind of therapies. When I'm saying modalities that I've mentioned, I remember I've mentioned the different kinds of signs and symptoms that or presentations, why you might go for a particular modality. Once you've gone in and you've had then that initial session, and the therapist invited you to share your story or what's happening for you, it might be at that point when you started to set goals. Session 1, session 2, you'll get into maybe some goal setting. You'll probably be asked, I would ask, what would things look like when they were better? Now, once we've gauged that from the beginning session, when we have a midpoint review, we'll start to look at, okay, this is what you've come in with, this was the problem, this is where you are now. So in that review, you'll see if things are improving or getting worse. Hopefully they're improving. That's the plan. Then okay, you're heading in the right direction. Yeah. So progress will look like movement in a positive way from the initial maybe goals or problems that were brought in the first instance in session 1, session 2. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I particularly like when you said about the goal setting.
Yeah.
So asking the client at the beginning, what does success look like to you? So when you're asking those review questions, if those things are coming up, it means it's working. There's some movement, there's progress.
Yeah, in short, basically. Yeah.
So how do you know when to stop counselling?
So I'm going to change that word of success to progress, because that's what we want to see is progression. Because you see, success can look like and is many things to many people. It's progression of improved mental state and well-being. We want to see progress in those areas. Okay. When do we stop? Well, again, you have, so I would always have in any of my work that I do, if I'm having an assessment, I'm gathering information, I'm having a midpoint review, and I'm having an endpoint review, if you like. So depends on presentation, week 6, week 10, week 12, depending. Now, you know when it's time to stop, because actually the problems that presented in the beginning are now being managed. They're either no longer a problem, or they're still a problem because life still exists around us. But now, thinking about CBT, you've got enough tools in your kit to be able to manage now when further instances that brought you there in the first place are happening. Or in this world of psychodynamic therapy, you've have much greater understanding now of the link between your childhood adverse experiences, your current situation, the link between the two and how it's affected, and now you know how to navigate through them. Yeah. So I could go on, but the point is, once you see that progress, or those things that have been distressing you no longer have the same hold over you, because you can now see the wood through the trees, you can see a way to cope, you can see a way to manage, you recognize and identify what's been going on with you, and you can manage it sufficiently. Yeah. So you never really need to, I've never really had to tell somebody now it's time to end the session. You know that if a good therapist, this is the next thing, a good therapist will not keep you in therapy longer than you need to be there. Yeah, will not keep you longer. You will begin to know when you need to wind down, and they also know, okay, you've hit a point. And that's why it's a two-way progress, and why you have to have a relationship, because if it's a two-way conversation and dynamic, and you're having reviews, you're always going back, or at key points going back to look at the initial presentation, the initial concern, the initial goals, you have something to measure against. Yeah, you have something to measure against to see the progress that's happening. And once you've reached all the criterion, if you like, then okay, you've come to the end. But there are some therapies that people are in for years and years and years and years. It just depends. It just depends. So there's no one set rule, but have something to measure against, and that's how you'll know as you're progressing, and your mental health and well-being is enhancing, and you're feeling better in yourself.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That we've come to the end
Oh,
of the
gosh.
of both sections.
Wow.
And I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. I know people pay for information like this, you know. This is things that people will get in training sessions
Yeah.
for their organization. So there's a lot of value in
Mm.
everything that you're saying. And I just hope that those listening will really gain something from it and be able to self-assess where they are and
Yeah.
how to, use some of these tools and advice that you've given us in this conversation that they can also then implement at home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the schools and in your community. And yeah, just thank you. That's all I can say is thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much, Keish, for having me on. I've just listened to your audience. Please go out and do some research. I've just literally touched. I haven't even got any deep, very deep, very deep at all. Go and do some research. Go and ask questions. Seek support. Seek therapists. Contact me. I'm always happy to speak and share information. I'm no gatekeeper. Our communities, people need to be aware of what's going on and how to deal with it. So thank you for inviting me back. I look forward to, many more conversations like this with you, because I think they're important. So
Yeah.
good job, you're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is Crossing Cultures. Thank you for tuning in. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. See you.
Making changes in new ranges, crossing cultures, crossing cultures, crossing paths.